Welcome to the Creative Industry Insight podcast, a podcast that looks at various roles in the creative world. I'm your host, Bobby. Today's guest, cinematographer Alice Brooks, joins us to talk about their work on Tick, Tick, Boom. Please be warned, there are heavy spoilers in this episode, so make yourself comfortable as we jump into the conversation with Alice. Hi, Alice. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Appreciate you taking the time to come talk to me about your latest film, Tick, Tick, Boom, which is out in Netflix right now, which I recently saw and I absolutely loved. I have to admit at the bat, when the first song came on about turning 30, I actually watched it a few days before my 30th birthday. And I looked at my girlfriend, we both just laughed at each other, and she said, "This is your future now." So it kind of hit home a little bit more than it should have, really. But yeah, for some strange reason, I can't stop listening to that song. And I'm not sure if I'm having a crisis or if it's just so catchy.
I think it's very catchy. Have spent 2 years listening to the music, more than 2 years at this point, and I still listen to 3090 when I go running. I just think it's the best running song there is.
It's just everything so about it so catchy. You've got the lyrics, the sound, the various instruments. You just can't get it out of your head. I was humming it pretty much the whole of the next day, much to annoyance to people as well. You know, I just can't help myself, unfortunately. How have you found the response to the film and everybody's sort of feedback to it?
Well, we made this movie. It took almost 2 years from the time I started prep to the release at the beginning of November. And it took so long because COVID shut us down for 6 months in the middle of our shoot. And so it feels amazing to have the movie out in the world finally. And also just the wonderful, amazing reception we're getting to the film. Because you never know, we all felt like we were making this really special story about Jonathan Larson and about dreams and a dreamer and sticking to your dreams no matter what. But you don't know until you release it what the reception's going to be. And it's been so lovely and wonderful.
No, it's great to hear. I think it's when you see online as well, people in like Twitter and other sites praising it. It feels like this year is very much the year of the musical. This film coming out, another film that you made as well, In the Heights, a film in the UK called Everybody's Talking About Jamie. And it kind of feels like musicals are slowly making a comeback. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. A small indie called West Side Story is coming out soon as well.
Just a small one there.
But it does feel like it's coming back. But I want to sort of, because you said it was a 2-year process from when you started prep. What would your prep look like, and where would you begin in planning for a shoot? Because it is slightly autobiographical, but it's also a musical, which I don't think that happens that often.
Yeah, I mean, it's a amazingly interesting, very complicated story, very complicated for a first-time director like Lynn to take on. And I mean, I'm so proud of the movie he made. And the way we did it was very different from any other. The way we prepped the movie was different than any other movie I've ever prepped before. And I attribute it to Lynn being in the theater for the last 20 years. So the way we prepped the movie was we basically workshopped our storyboarding sessions were like a workshop. And in Tick, Tick, Boom, there's a workshop for his play Superbia, for Jonathan Larson's play Superbia. And so when you workshop a show or a play, you try different things out and test things, and you have a group of creative people around you, and you start to explore ideas. And that was our storyboarding session. So Lynn and the storyboard artist and myself would sit down for these storyboard sessions, and usually it's the three of us. But on this movie, it was 6 of us. Lynn also included the production designer and the AD and the writer, Stephen Levinson. And the six of us would sit around a table, and Lynn and Stephen would read the scenes out loud. And then we'd start to dive into what the scene was really about and how we were going to approach shooting it. And then the storyboard artist would start drawing our shots. The next day we'd come back and we'd look at it and we'd go, we'd either start from scratch or we'd remove things, and we'd think things were working and things weren't. And then I would take, once we were happy with the storyboards for a scene, I would take those storyboards and cut them to the pre-records of the music. And then we'd be able to see what our musical numbers looked and felt like to the music, because it's really hard to read a script for a musical because you don't get a sense of the music while you're reading it. You're just reading lyrics. And so that gave everyone a sense of how it would play out. And then we'd go back and we'd change things again. And it was just this amazing discovery exploration process that was fascinating and an amazing collaboration among all of us.
I must imagine that the storyboard artist must have so much patience, considering that, they'll do a whole day's work and then it could potentially be, no, we need to change this all around. And to be like, oh, okay.
So the storyboard artist is Grant Schaefer, and he is a complete, like the most talented human being I've ever met. All his storyboards are so detailed, and we can describe things, and he nails it with the drawings. And he was so easy. He would change things that, it was very easy, and he was the fastest. So I love him, and I would love to do every movie with him.
He pretty much should get an award for just like patience and everything. And being able to change things around. It is a special skill to be able to get that detail, that if somebody has something in their mind, and then to sort of a proper visual for it. Because you're talking about workshops. Perfect. When you're having these workshops with different head of departments and going through breaking down the script and prepping the scenes and everything, is this something that you've done before on previous shows, or is it something that is slightly introduced differently because it's coming from a script that used to be part of a stage play?
Each movie's approach and the way a director wants to approach a movie is so different. When I did In the Heights, I've known John Chu for 20 years, and we've done lots of projects together. And that collaboration was more with me and the choreographer and John. And this was amazing because the writer was with us the whole time. And I've never been able to sit with a writer. Sometimes I never even meet the writer on a movie. And so it was wonderful that Lynn wanted to make sure all our ideas were incorporated on the page. So I guess I would say it's just very different. Each movie is different. And I don't think it necessarily matters the genre. I think it's really how the director wants to run the show.
With Lin-Manuel being a first-time director, did you feel like you had, and because he had the theatre background, and then I can imagine it being very different to jumping to feature films, did you feel that when you're prepping in terms of lens choices and how you're going to light the scene and also camera movement, did you feel like you needed to help him more sort of in making those decisions, or was it a case that he already had a vision and that he just needed to sort of more translate it onto screen?
I think Lynn has very specific visions for sure. I mean, he is a storyteller. He tells, he started as a composer, and sometimes he's a storyteller as an actor, and now he's a storyteller as a director. And so I think he has worked on enough projects, and he is just a sponge for information that sometimes he had very specific ideas, and sometimes he wanted to explore ideas. I mean, the idea for the wall coming down in Sunday came about because we were all looking at the model, and we knew the Broadway legends were going to be in that scene. But the idea that the diner came down happened in one of these storyboard sessions where we were looking at the model, and then the wall came down, and then it became this revelation of that was going to become Sunday, and it was going to become a proscenium, and they were all going to walk out. And for swimming, it was amazing. I love swimming because it feels like it is a visual representation of Jonathan Larson's of this single moment of genius for Jonathan Larson. And And that happened because we fell in love with the swimming pool, because Lynn liked the music, that the tile at the bottom of the pool looked like music staff paper. And we would go to the pool, and I would take my iPhone and dunk it underwater and start to explore what it looked like underwater. And then we'd play these during these sessions. And while we were playing them, we were just mesmerized by these beautiful tiles at the bottom of the pool. And one was a 30. And Lynn said, well, what happens if Jonathan touches the 30, the number he is so scared of turning, and it turns into a treble clef? And that became the inspiration for swimming. And so all these ideas were really, I mean, those are two sort of like amazing discoveries for Lynn. But the whole process was discovery, whether or not we found a shot or even what camera and lenses to choose. I asked Lynn, what do you want to be involved in this, or do you want me just to choose? And he said, I want to learn everything. So he did want to learn everything. And sometimes it was a lot of explaining to him, and that was fun for me. It was pretty exciting.
This is such a strong feature debut as well. And I can imagine that the sort of pressure, because it must be so close to Lin-Manuel, especially that it is a show that changed his life, that I've read in an interview when he first saw it. What I would like to jump back into as well is, whilst you're shooting, something that I noticed whilst watching the film is the use of space. There seems to be a lot of areas in the film, where it's shot very tightly. It's shot in very tight areas quite early on the film. So I guess the idea of when they're having the house party, everything's very close and tight together. You could kind of feel the atmosphere of the party, but also feel part of the house. I guess I don't want to say it's kind of in a weird voyeuristic way of watching watching what's going on in front of you. Is that sort of a theme that was established early on, or is that something that sort of grew on in the pre-production process when storyboarding was going about?
So that happened actually. That started to develop before we ever storyboarded. So as this was a very personal story to Lynn, it was a very personal story to me too. When I read the script, I looked at the pages and I said to myself, these could be scenes out of my childhood. I grew up in New York in the 80s, and when I was 10, we left New York for LA, and that was 2 months before this movie begins. And so this period in New York is forever etched in my mind. And it's the mind of a 10-year-old where color and light and emotions are all heightened. And I grew up in a tenement apartment, just like Jonathan, with the bathtub in the kitchen, very cramped space. My father was a playwright trying to make it on Broadway as well, or in the New York theater scene. And my mother was a dancer like Susan. And our house was filled with all these wonderful, amazing, creative people, just like Jonathan. Boho days could have been any Saturday in my childhood, where my parents' friends just piled into our house. And so when I shared these things with Lynn, Lynn and I are the same age, and he said, I want this movie to look like I remembered it when I was 10. He's like, I don't want it from some other perspective. I want it to feel like a 10-year-old in New York City in 1990. And we started talking about Jonathan's childlikeness and how in 3090 he sings about Peter Pan and finding Never Never Land. He doesn't want to grow up. So we decided we wanted things to feel really tight and really cramped. Like in the apartment, we never pulled walls out. We wanted to feel the space enclosed on him. And in the diner too, we wanted everything to feel just jammed and close, so that when he does have these dreams, like in No More or in Sunday or in Swimming, and you suddenly have expanse, there's like a feeling of relief. And that was feeling like we were right inside of Jonathan Larson's mind.
So I just wanted to sort of track back, because hearing about that you kind of experienced those similar things, that must have been pretty cool to see in front of like your eyes, having all these creative sort of piggyback off one another and bounce off ideas and everything. So I can imagine just being a fly on the wall would have been incredible. But when you're sort of putting from memories and sort of coming into trying to translate that onto screen, do you have discussions with production designers as well, and just to sort of, I guess, decide on color palettes and how to sort of mold the scene into what's going to work and what's not going to work?
Yeah, I mean, we did lots of paint tests for the apartment, so that it was very important that everything feel very, very true to Jonathan Larson's life. And we had an enormous amount of references. Like you and we have a camera on us all the time. Kids are going to grow up, every moment of their life is photographed. And that wasn't true in 1990, but it was true for Jonathan. His friend had a beta camera. Her father was a documentarian, and we have 8 years of footage recorded of Jonathan's life, including 2 weeks before he passed away. He was very scared his apartment was going to catch on fire. That apartment that he never left, he passed away in that apartment. And so he did a detailed video of every item in his apartment and exactly where it was. And so we had an incredible reference. So the apartment is basically the exact same footprint that the apartment is. The paintings on the wall, his friends still owned and we borrowed for the movie. So there were things that we wanted to remain true, but we also were able to adjust space slightly. So there were things we cramped in more, and then there were things in the apartment we expanded slightly, just so because we needed a little bit more space to shoot in the living room with all those people. But we all picked ceiling height together so that it did feel you would feel the ceiling, so that he felt boxed in. And these were all conversations Lynn and Alex DiGirlando, who is the production designer, and I had together, and made these decisions creatively together.
Because I can imagine as well, whilst creating the film like this, is that how closely you'd work with the production designer with the use of space. And there's one, I think this potentially is probably my favorite musical number, and that is I think the song is called No More, where you cut between the old apartment and the brand new plush apartment. What I really would like to sort of break down is, so you obviously have the use of the small space of where they all sort of feel trapped in with their old apartment. When they go to the new apartment, they have that more the idea of freedom, especially with Michael, Jonathan's best friend, who, in air quotes, a sellout because he's quit acting for a real job. And when he gets that freedom and having that idea of, no more having showers in the kitchen, no more carrying his laundry down the road. But what's so great about this is a mixture of also editing and everything that's built up, choreography as well, is when you had to play out the scenes, did you shoot both sets with the whole song, or did you deliberately cut it in between, only shoot certain scenes for the then editor to cut it and transition in between the two sets?
There's very little room to have changed anything about No More. We storyboarded each shot specifically, and we didn't really cover much more. We didn't overlap anything. So when he opens the fridge and picks up the moldy food, that is the only shot we have for that. When it says no more neurotic and he locks the door, that's the only, or we had 2 shots for that, but we had a close up on the lock and him. And so all of that there was very little room for error on us or the choreography. Everything had to be very, very dialed in, because we were cross-cutting between these 2 locations, where you felt the old apartment, and then we wanted it to have sort of like a Wizard of Oz kind of feel when you would go into the expanse of Michael's beautiful luxury, penthouse apartment.
Yeah, because I think that's probably one of the most beautiful choreographed scenes, that the transition between the both and the fun that they have with the scenes. And you could really tell the 2 actors are really just enjoying that sort of moment that they can get, not Andrew Garfield's character Jonathan, but but Michael sort of having that freedom.
But even Jonathan gets there at the end, right? When they do that musical, when they do the slow motion in the lobby. So like finally Jonathan is like enjoying himself. And then you have the jump cut to him in the subway
Yeah,
car.
exactly. Or I've been on that sort of subway or the tube in London many times, like a sardine in a can, and it's just, yeah, going from that freedom to that, it's not fun at all. But it's just so well choreographed.
And
What
even that, I mean, when you talk about production design, like the way like the light, the lamp in the subway lamp right behind Jonathan's head is the exact same lamp we use in the elevator. So like there were little plays to make sure everything cut specifically, and the door is the exact same size as the subway door for the elevator. So these were all things we had to very specifically plan out. And that's why I love the production designer being in those storyboard sessions with us, because he heard all our ideas. And then sometimes he would share things about the set design, and then that would inspire things as well.
but there's also, I guess, when you have those early sort of discussions as well, where you could probably sit down and spitball ideas to, I guess, portray what the best way is to shoot some of the scenes. And I guess to me, I think probably what might have been the hardest scene is probably the swimming pool scene, where Jonathan sort of discovers the song that he's been looking for. What was the hardest scene to shoot in the film?
I mean, sorry, the swimming pool scene, or what was the other one you said?
I think that was probably the hardest scene to
Oh
shoot.
yeah, that was very much the hard. I mean, that or Sunday, both of them were tricky. Sunday was tricky because of COVID restrictions, whereas swimming was tricky. It's actually funny. I've watched swimming so many times now that I forgot how small the location is, because in the movie it feels so much bigger than it actually was. And I was looking through stills on my phone today, and I found a picture of the swimming pool, and there was no deck on either side. It was like 3 feet wide and a foot and a half on the other side. And we had to have a crane to do all those high angle shots, and also to do some tracking shots with a underwater head. And we had underwater divers for several days before putting in a platform so that we'd have enough space to put the crane on. And then when we went into the locker room, and then overnight, the diving crew came back and removed this platform that ran the length of the pool. So the size of the pool was one hard thing. Not knowing how long Andrew was going to be able to swim for, which I cannot believe it. He swam for 3 days straight without complaining once. He is his father was a swim coach, and we had a double there just in case to do like shots so that he could take a rest. And he said no, he wanted to do everything. So pretty fantastic. And then anytime you work in water, it's tricky. And that scene I'm also somewhat the most proud of, because I edited those animatics too, and then went through, and there's like one shot per word almost in some parts of the song, and instead of using space to feel that sort of chaos and claustrophobia for Jonathan, we used just a sheer amount of shots. So it's cutty until suddenly he sees that 30 at the bottom of the pool, and he sinks down, and then everything slows down. And then we get to that big expanse of that huge wide shot of him at the bottom of the pool. And so that was how we got into Jonathan's head in that scene, was by the sheer number of shots. And I wanted to make sure we weren't just repeating the same shot over and over again, and that the camera angles were different per shot. And so we did the animatic. I had this huge master spreadsheet that had the time code for the music and each lyric that we were covering, and then the shot description and the drawing. My spreadsheet was intense. So I think it was, I don't know, something like 250 shots we did or something.
Wow. Because again, sometimes shots don't go to plan whilst you're on set. There's just certain things that you can't plan for. Sometimes it's equipment might become faulty, or just something doesn't work. Was there ever a freedom on the set to sort of improvise how you're going to shoot certain scenes, or was it just you'd like to be as strict to the storyboards as possible?
No, there were definitely things like, I mean, even in swimming, we had drawn a shot just from the side of the pool of Jonathan popping out of the pool at the very end. And then that transitioned us into Jonathan writing on this page. And and we ended up finding this beautiful overhead shot where he gets out of the pool. And we said that was what we were doing instead. Or there were, I mean, we didn't storyboard the whole movie either. We storyboarded most of the musical numbers, but dialogue scenes we didn't storyboard, and that was just a really nice, like, it was Lynn and me, and we'd watch the rehearsal, and Lynn would work with the actors and I'd be the fly on the wall figuring out how we were going to cover the scene. And then I'd go to Lynn and I'd write down a shot list on in a corner of the room, and then the actors would go away to hair and makeup and wardrobe, and Lynn and I would talk about what our approach was going to be for the scene. So there were some things that were very specific, like no more, and we couldn't really change, but there were other things that were allowed to develop on the day.
Because I can imagine that even if you're doing simple dialogue scenes between the actors and everything, in terms of just over shoulders and everything, but you always want to sort of, I guess, as you are the cinematographer and framing everything, you want to create something that's going to bring the audience in. And also there is a number of different formats used in the film. It does turn to sort of 4:3 when it becomes the rap video. And then also you could tell the sort of the difference between when Jonathan Larson's on the stage on his one-man show performing, which feels more like you're going into his mind to sort of as the narrator. But what's long-winded way of me saying is, was the idea of using various formats always something that was in your mind to sort of convey certain story points and musical numbers, or is that something that developed later on?
That we started talking about pretty early on. We were, like I told you about the VHS tapes that we were watching, and that really became a big inspiration for us as well. So then it became, well, how are we going to capture this? Do we want to just use our main digital camera, our Panavision camera, or do we want to try other formats? And so I tested lots of different formats for the VHS Betacam 4:3 footage. And so for all of the stuff on Jonathan, that we shot on real Betacam. And we didn't shoot to tape, we recorded to a deck, but we still had that old sensor and the old lens, and it had all that old texture to it that just doesn't exist unless visual effects adds it. So we didn't cheat that at all. And then we wanted to do Super 8 for the little kids. In the number Y, you see flashbacks to when Michael and Jonathan were little boys. And so I had a Super 8 camera that I had since college, and it had to be revived. I had left a battery in there for 20 years that had exploded, but we ended up, the ACs were able to bring it back to life and all of that. And then I just shot that. That's the only stuff I operated in the movie. And I loved it because I got to just pretend I was one of the parents videoing their kids, and with my old camera from college. And then we had, and then the rap video. So the rap video we didn't shoot that on Betacam. We shot that on on our main camera, but we used different lenses. We used zoom lenses, spherical lenses for that instead of our anamorphic lenses that we had for the rest of the movie. And we didn't use zooms in the rest of the movie. And then we pillar boxed it. We framed for 4:3, but we knew we were going to bring in the wings for the, because when it goes into the music video, the wings sort of come in, the black wings. So that was something we storyboarded and figured out how to get in and out of that video.
Yeah, because I like this sort of the use of everything, the use of different formats is something that is just does add to the time period of the film, and it kind of gives you a bit more sort of insight in the creativity of everything, really, and the way it's all been brought together. it would be like remiss as well to not to mention about Stephen Sondheim, who is actually part of the film himself, who also passed away recently, which is crazy to think that he was Jonathan Larson's mentor and everything. I think this is more, it's kind of steering away from the film, but with him having such a musical footprint, do you have like a favorite Sondheim piece of work, either if it's film or on stage?
Well, the very first musical I saw on Broadway was Into the Woods when I was 8, and I saw the original cast perform it. But my mom, A Little Night Music is also one of my favorites. My mom still sings that musical to me, and I can recognize the music far, far away at any moment. I love Send in the Clowns. So I think those might be my top 2 Sondheim shows. Or Sunday in the Park with George. So those 3, I mean, or Sweeney Todd. I don't know. I don't think there's a way to decide. I think it depends on your mood or where you are in your life. But I'll always have Into the Woods will always have a special place in my heart for sure.
Yeah, solid choice. So I would like to wrap up this interview with one final question. So this is just slightly a little bit more fun, slightly different. So if an alien came down today and asked you to perform one song from a musical, any musical you could choose, except for In the Heights and Tick, Tick, Boom, because I think that'd be slightly cheating because you would have been so ingrained in the work with that, and you had to perform without any problems, what would you choose?
I'm gonna say Send in the Clowns.
Yeah. Okay, I'll accept that.
Thank you.
For everybody who's interested, Tick Tick Boom is streaming now on Netflix. Please go watch it. It's a magical film. It's incredible. I really, really loved it, and I think everybody, it is one of those sort of very good musical feel good film that kind of makes you question, I guess, it makes you question sort of your mortality and what you're working towards and what you're wanting to achieve. And I'd like to thank Alice for joining me. Thank you so much for speaking with me
Thank you
tonight.
so much. It
Thank
was
you very
wonderful.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You take care, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.